Accessibility. What's that? Where do I start? I can confirm the session is one of the best training courses I've been on at the co-op. I learnt about things I didn't even realise I didn't know. It's motivating. It made me want to test a bunch of other sites following the session. Come and experience Return a Leaky Flower Bag. Return a Leaky Flower Bag is a co-op website filled with accessibility issues. Your task is to find them all. You'll experience accessibility issues firsthand. It's available to all colleagues. Book your 1-hour session for your team today. To do that, email accessibility@coop.co.uk.
Hello and welcome back to Accessibility Manchester, where we are on day 2 of the co-op takeover, looking at inclusion and diversity and how we do that at co-op. Hopefully you got to see the talks yesterday, where we had 4 talks across a range of topics looking at how we can be inclusive at co-op. And today we move that on to talk about how we can be inclusive at scale across our various products and services, and we've got 5 brilliant talks lined up for you today. First up is Samuel. Sam's a guest speaker today from Fable, and he's going to talk to us about the importance of getting testing with real users using different assertive technologies. We've recently partnered with Fable and used them across a multitude of our products and services, so can't wait to hear what Sam's got to talk to us about. Next up is Dave Cunningham, one of the organisers of Accessibility Manchester, who's going to talk to you about our accessibility policy and how that empowers teams to get accessibility into their everyday work. So how can you use policy and enforcement not as an overhead, but as a benefit and a force for good? So Dave will talk to you about a lot of the great work that he's personally been the lead on in that space. Next up is Chris Gibbons. Chris works in our web team and is looking at the design system. And he's going to talk about our framework to keep standards high within the design system when it comes to accessibility. So some real practical things you can take away there in terms of how to scale your accessibility learnings across multiple teams. Fourth on the list is Alex Hall, and Alex is going to talk about how we've demystified web content accessibility guidelines. There's lots of confusing things out there about what it means to be accessible, and our content team have done a fantastic job in simplifying that and demystifying a lot of the myths that are out there and making accessibility really easy for people to understand and bring to life. And then last but absolutely by no means least is Vicky Riley. So Vicky's going to talk to you all about our accessibility panel, which really helps us be inclusive in the work that we do. Vicky's fantastic, and the accessibility panel really helps us look at how we can be inclusive in our work, in our team. So that should be a fantastic talk. So less from me, and let's get into the first talk of the day. I'll hand you over to Sam from Fable.
The community manager at Fable, and I am also a completely blind screen reader user. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the importance of testing your websites with people with disabilities, and a little bit about Fable's solution. See, everyone knows that testing your product with people with disabilities is super important. Automated testing is a really important first step that will help you catch the errors and is an important place to start on your accessibility journey. But we know that automated testing doesn't catch all of the possible errors. And it doesn't necessarily tell you about the actual experience that people with disabilities are having when they use your website or your app. However, testing with people with disabilities can be difficult. How do you recruit? How do you compensate people? What testing methodologies work best? The entire experience can be overwhelming. And helping with that problem is the reason that Fable exists. Fable helps you test your products with a wide variety of people, all of whom use assistive technology full-time. For example, we work with people who use screen readers, like myself. We work with those who use screen magnification technology. We work with folks who use what we call alternative navigation. And so that can cover voice control software, such as Dragon Naturally Speaking. It can cover the voice control software built into other platforms like Mac, iOS, Android. It can cover things like switch users. So users who can only move perhaps one hand or a small part of their body and can control the entire computer using only one or two buttons. We also offer multiple ways to engage with folks with disabilities. We offer written compatibility tests that allow you to test with multiple people and get written reports about where the issues are, what the completion status is, and what the experience is like. We offer prototype reviews where you can have interactions with people with disabilities by a video chat, and you can show them your prototypes before they ever get to development. You can do user interviews with people, and you can go through ideation and design and research, or just learn about assistive technologies that you may have never been exposed to before. You can do QA sessions with folks if you need to talk with someone who has a little bit more development experience and understand how best to use landmarks or labels or how best to lay out controls, that kind of thing. And you can also do self-guided tests, which is a way for you to get video results from people with disabilities without yourself having to moderate the sessions. Another key aspect of what Fable offers is our fast turnaround. We return results in 2 business days so that you can engage in testing frequently without having to wait for results and without bogging down your existing processes. We also help you with measurement, whether it's measuring completion percentages of tasks, whether it's using AUS, which is our adapted version of the SUS scale, and we help you with knowledge. You get access to our Learning Center, which is packed full of articles, not only on how to use Fable, but also on assistive technology, on topics and accessibility, many of which are written by those of us who live with disabilities ourselves. So you get to hear directly from the experts rather than taking things second or third hand. And you work with our trained, vetted community so that you can get the highest quality, most professional results possible. And that's what helps you at Fable drive inclusive outcomes. One good example is we work with the CBC, which is Canada's version of the BBC, and we helped them ensure that their online election results were fully and completely accessible. Of course, when they first started, the accessibility and the experience for people with disabilities wasn't great. But they were able, first of all, to understand what improvements needed to be made, to make those improvements, and then to validate that their accessibility efforts were actually working. And they were then able to do a final test on Canada's actual national election night that allowed them to validate that, yes, they had created an experience that works great for all kinds of assistive technology users across different platforms and different devices with different abilities and needs. Another company using us to perform high impact research is Gatsby. You may know them as a web platform that lets you build your websites entirely in JavaScript. And they recently used Fable to perform research with various prototypes to figure out what methods of JavaScript routing would work the best for people with disabilities. And they were then able to take those research findings and include them in Gatsby to trickle down to make things more accessible for every website that was built on the Gatsby platform. And of course, we're also working with Co-op to help them with all of the above to ensure that accessibility is embedded into their process so that they can test early, so that they can test often, and so that accessibility can be built in to their entire process from initial design to final release. And that's what we're really passionate about here at Fable. Thank you very much.
The power of policy. Hello, I'm Dave Cunningham, Design Ops and Accessibility Lead at the Co-op. I've tried and failed to implement accessibility at scale before. I've run training sessions, I've done audits. It's really tough, and often when you leave the business, so does the desire of the team. Even when I've built momentum, accessibility would often be an add-on, something that we do later down the line, or we had to show that commercial value. And I often thought, well, how many times do we have to hear these same stats, like 1 in 5 people have a disability? And how many companies need to be sued? We know that digital lawsuits tripled in the US between 2017 and 2018. Companies such as Netflix, Disney, and Domino's. And why is accessibility not part of everything we do? The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines have been around for over 20 years, and we all know that this is the right thing to do. But the reality is that teams can be overwhelmed and not have the support and tools, and they often don't have buy-in from the boardroom, or there is just so much like technical or accessibility debt, people are just unsure where to start. So perhaps we need an angry army or a Julius Caesar to come in and rule the roost of accessibility. Well, actually, maybe that's not a bad idea as it sounds. The Romans were very successful at influencing culture. They built better roads, they introduced better ways of getting rid of our sewerage, and they even showed us how to use money. But unlike other armies, the Romans, they didn't try to turn everyone into a Roman. They integrated, they recognised the problems, and they provided a better way of living. They were so successful that Rome is often known as the Eternal City, and we're still benefiting from the roads that the Romans built today. So how can we create our own eternal city for accessibility? Because we know for sure that being angry about it, it just doesn't work. So in our research, we found that digital teams' approaches are fairly similar. We do some research, we define the problem, we do a bit of design, we build something, we test, iterate, and put live. So we mapped out these processes and we found 8 key areas. So each of these 8 areas has a major effect on accessibility, every stage has a crucial role to play. For example, if we buy off-the-shelf products that aren't accessible, we are doomed from the start. So it starts with procurement, it goes to research, design, front-end build at a component level, to content, to quality assurance, automated testing of live products and services, and then finally our annual accessibility audit. So I work with the specialist in these 8 areas to write clear directives. What were the smallest things that we could do that would have the biggest effect? And each area has no more than 3 directives, some just have 1. Our accessibility policy was born. You can read it at coop.co.uk/accessibility. So let's take a look at one of these directives. This one sits under design. We will include people with access needs in our crit sessions on a regular basis. So this directive, it ensures people with access needs are constantly part of the conversation. It also broadens our designers' knowledge, and in theory, it sounds great. But remember, our teams are often overwhelmed, and we need to make it easier for our teams, not harder. So recruitment could take weeks, there would be loads of admin, so what can we do? So to help, we brought in Fable. We now have an army of accessibility experts that we can do crits with. It takes 2 minutes to do a request, and sessions are available within 48 hours. This was a comment from one of our designers. We've had lots of these, so I've never seen somebody navigate with voice alone. So gradually we're building up people's skills and awareness so we can catch these issues early on. And eventually we'll have our own accessibility, our own co-op accessibility army that can spot those issues, and we'll build accessible services and products as standard. So how's the rest of the accessibility policy going? So we've got products down the left and directives across the top. There's a long way to go, and it's really hard. And in total, there are 255 directives across 15 product teams. But we're making progress. We're around 20% there, and we're aiming for 90%. It's great to see that progress. And accessibility at scale is a million little nudges all the time. Our policy, it doesn't fix all the old issues, but it enables that constant conversation that accessibility needs. So to summarise, get to know your teams, fit into the way that they're working. Be intentional, form habits. I'd recommend reading Atomic Habits by James Clear. And measure your progress. Keep track of those directives. If they're not quite right, evolve them, change them. The end goal is to make products and services that are accessible. To ask a question, visit Slido/accessibility Manchester. You'll find a link in the YouTube description.
Hello, I'm Chris Gibbons, and I'm the lead front-end engineer on the design system team in Co-op. Today, I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes or so talking to you about how we're building in accessibility and standards into the foundations of our design system. But first, let's have a quick history lesson. Co-op's design system, much like any other design system in any other company, started off life side of desk. there was no dedicated team around it, and contribution was firmly in that of the community. The mission statement for the design system at Co-op is to help us create a cost-efficient and coherent user experience for everybody, whether you're a colleague or a customer. The emphasis is definitely on coherency and not consistency. Ultimately, we want our products to feel the same as opposed to looking the same. Last year, we had a great year with the design system. We put in place a variety of global design libraries, mainly for designers, but also for all engineers. We released 12 brand new components into the design system, and we updated 14 existing components. And in total, we now have 42. And that's great. But the messaging that we're constantly getting from our colleagues is that around the idea of trust and trust within the design system. We're hearing that people want to trust that the design system is up to date, that it meets and continues to meet high standards, and that ultimately that it is helping them to use the right thing and also to do the right thing. So to help this, we've put in place a Pally dashboard. The Pally dashboard enables all of our products and all of our colleagues to quickly, at a glance, see which ones have got the most errors, which ones have got warnings, which ones have got notifications. And that's helping them empower them to go in and fix problems. We're looking within the front-end community at building out a suite of documentation which will enable and again empower other engineers or designers to look at the standards that we're advocating other engineers to use. More recently, we've started to introduce Storybook into our design system, and we're slowly porting over our components into Storybook. This gives us accessibility add-ons, which enable us to have accessibility testing built into the pipeline, and also it gives us visual regression testing and a load of other really, really nice additions for the developer experience. And it was around these conversations within the team and within the wider communities about how we can best start to develop our own accessibility framework. Now here we can see a very, very early iteration of the testing framework. And at first glance, it's very busy, there's a lot going on. However, if you look at it, you can quickly get a lot of information and a lot of insight from it. The green cells show where the components are passing. The red cells show where the components are failing. Yellow shows where the test criteria isn't applicable. And the blue show where more information is needed, either from design, from development, or from product. The columns give us the testing criteria, and the rows give us which component is being tested. The quick summary of the spreadsheet shows that of the 38 components tested and of the 548 tests performed, there was a 96% pass rate. And the framework allows us very quickly to see which tests were failing on which components. However, the one thing that we quickly realized was this accessibility testing framework didn't provide us with a one-size-fits-all approach. And by that, I mean the age-old argument of components versus user journeys. The component element testing was perfect. It allowed us to test all of the individual components and quickly see where there was passes and where there was failures. Where the framework fell down was when these components started to get pieced together into products and actual user journeys. We quickly iterated. We tried a few different platforms. We went through Word, we tried Trello, finally settling on a nice, simple Miro board. This Miro board allowed us to be more explicit with the information that we were trying to convey. And it also allowed us to share it to other teams to give them the power back for testing. So how does this help us as a design system team? First off, This framework provides us with the ability to start creating consistency between teams. And this is super important because it gives us as a design system team confidence. The framework also provides teams with a baseline. And a baseline is super important because, again, it gives them a better indication as to what our expectations as a design system team are. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, it also begins to set the expectations of anybody who wishes to contribute back into the design system team. The contribution could take the form of a new component or a fix to an existing component. But no matter how big or how small the change or the contribution is, we know as a team that the test that the new code will have gone through is the same that any one of the design system team would have gone through themselves. And this enables us to send such a positive message back into the business and within the wider communities. It's amazing.
Hello, I'm Alex Hall. I'm a content designer here at Co-op. I'm going to talk a little bit about our accessibility guidelines and standards. So this is a quote from a software engineer called Ben Mustel-Rose. It's from our last Accessibility Manchester event that we did, and it says, "Make accessibility accessible. I'm not criticising WCAG, but it's not exactly a 10-minute light read." Now this quote really stuck with me and really got me thinking. If we can't make accessibility accessible, then how can we expect anyone to actually do accessibility? So the quote's referring to the web content accessibility guidelines, the accessibility standards that we all follow generally in digital. And I've got the homepage of the web content accessibility guidelines here, and already there's a lot going on. There's a lot of specialist language and it's quite overwhelming. In our work, we often come across phrases like, "We support WCAG AA guidelines and some of the AAA," or "It's up to you which bits of AAA you support." But what does this actually mean? It's not very inclusive, it's not very accessible, it's not very clear what you're talking about when you hear this. It can leave teams thinking, well, what should we be covering? And also it can leave decision makers and stakeholders thinking, what should we be supporting, or even completely unaware of what we're meant to be supporting. So how do we solve this problem? Well, there's lots of things that we can do, but at Co-op, one of the things we're trying out is using our own accessibility standards internally. The psychologist Gerd Gigerenzer studies how humans make decisions, and his main finding from his work is that simple rules often outperform complex models. So for example, a fielder in cricket or in baseball or something like that, they aren't calculating the trajectory when they make a catch. They aren't using any complicated mathematical model or anything like that. They're using a simple rule called the gaze heuristic, which helps them work out where they need to be to make a catch. And we didn't have anything like this really for accessibility, so we decided to see if we could make some simple rules around accessibility. We reviewed the web content accessibility guidelines and we organised them under simple rules. So our simple rule, let users control audio, animation and video, covers 7 WCAG guidelines. And you can see we've got audio control, pause, stop, hide, and loads more covered by just this one rule. We've applied content design principles. So a lot of accessibility is content design, but quite often it doesn't actually have content design applied to accessibility information or to guidelines and standards. You know, they're not clear, they're not concise, they're not actionable. So we've used plain English and we've avoided specialist terms as much as possible. For example, web content accessibility guidelines say navigational mechanisms that are repeated on multiple web pages within a set of web pages occur in the same relative order each time they are repeated unless a change is initiated by the user. Whew. We say use menus, buttons, and icons consistently. We've made them actionable. So for example, do not use images of text except for logos and product shots. So it's a clear statement. We've structured them. So we created a very basic content model for our standards to follow with a simple rule at the top. And if you want, you can just take that and use it. But then there's more detail if you need it or if you want it, with an outline of the problem, what we know works well, some good and bad examples, and which WCAG guidelines are being covered by this standard or this simple rule. So it's version 1 and we know we can improve them, but we've already had some good feedback. This is from a designer who said, really simple to understand and apply to designs. It's a really nice simplification of standards I've always found a bit overwhelming. And I promise you I did not make that quote up. Like, I couldn't have made it more perfect, but there we are. That's a true quote. Very pleased with that. Accessibility is not only about compliance, it's about changing the culture. So to do that, we've got to give people the tools, we've got to make accessibility accessible. We hope that having our own simplified internal standards can be one of many things that helps us along the way to changing that culture and doing this. You can find the standards at coop.co.uk/accessibility/standards. And please do go and take a look, check them out. And if you've got any feedback at all, you can send that to accessibility@coop.co.uk, and we'd really love to hear what you think. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Vicky Riley and I'm lead user researcher on the digital skills team. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about creating accessible products and services for our colleagues at Co-op. The digital skills team are a small team of designers and delivery managers, and we're responsible for creating resources that enable colleagues across the Co-op to work more effectively together. In the past, we've also run workshops and coached colleagues on their journey to working in a more agile way. Here's an example of the type of materials that the digital skills team have been working on and researching with this year. This is the Ways of Working website, and it's a place for colleagues to find out how to get started with agile ways of working. The team are currently designing a set of guidelines to help teams to set up collaborative ways of working. Here you can see the vision and goals activity on the Ways of Working website, which includes step-by-step guidance and case studies to help colleagues understand how this could work for them. We've been observing 3 teams in technology using the team guidelines, and this is to find out whether they're understandable and whether they're usable without additional guidance from a coach. As user researcher on the digital skills team, it's my job to work with the team to understand who our users are and what they need, to make sure that we're working on the right thing and that we're designing and building it in the right way. On this project, all of our users are Co-op colleagues who want to learn about and adopt agile ways of working, so a very specific group of users. Nearly all the colleagues and teams that we work with get in touch with us via word of mouth, and the research that we do changes almost every month. So we'll go from researching and testing new workshop formats to usability testing a prototype on screen, or a year ago, as you can see from these photos, paper prototype testing with colleagues in One Angel Square. We know from previous research that there's a strong desire across Co-op to work in a different way, but colleagues often don't know where to start, and they can face lots of barriers, including lack of time and sometimes lack of permission from leaders. We use lots of different techniques to understand the colleague needs and to test different ways of working with colleagues to help them embrace new ways of working. Here's an example of a survey that we used to benchmark colleagues' understanding before and after a workshop that we ran. Following the launch of the accessibility policy back in August 2020, all researchers and designers made the commitment to carry out research with at least 1 in 5 participants who has a known access need. And at that point, the digital skills team were faced with the following question: how might we ensure that all of our workshops, coaching techniques, and resources are accessible to all colleagues? And the answer might seem obvious. Of course, we should be including colleagues in all of our research who have a disability. However, we were unable to identify colleagues who do have a disability, who were willing to take part in our research and who were relevant to the research at that point in time. As I already mentioned, we're researching with very specific groups of users, small teams who approach us for help. So it was really frustrating for us that we couldn't involve colleagues who have a disability in all of our research. When I say relevant to the research, I mean colleagues who wanted to learn about and adopt new ways of working, particularly agile ways of working at that point in time. For me, that meant that it just wasn't possible to recruit people via an agency and do some general accessibility testing. We really need to ensure that the resources that we create are accessible and understandable to all colleagues who work at the Co-op, the same set of colleagues who face the barriers that we've uncovered time and again in previous research. So after spending some time with Dave Cunningham and speaking to Natalie, Eric and Carly from Represent, I decided to trial the creation of the Co-op Colleague Accessibility Research Panel. Essentially, the idea is to build a panel of colleagues to be involved in research and design so that we can make sure that all colleagues can access our digital services and products, so that we can consider digital accessibility at every stage, and then constantly review and improve everything that we build and develop. So Co-op colleagues who are living with a disability condition or illness are now able to express an interest in getting involved in our research and design via a Microsoft form. Here's just a little screenshot of the types of questions that you'd be asked. Being a colleague accessibility tester involves things like giving feedback on your experiences of using products or services. It could involve reviewing designs to give your opinion on how we could improve them. It's completely up to you as a research participant how much you want to get involved and how much time you want to spend with us. We're grateful for any time at all. As it stands, we've shared the form with Co-op colleagues in technology and more widely across some Yammer channels. So far, 14 colleagues who work across food stores, funeral homes, in the support centre, and as member pioneers have signed up, which is brilliant. And they all have a really wide range of disabilities and illnesses that impact the way they might interact with digital products and services. We're still on the lookout for new panel members to get involved in the research and design of colleague-facing products and services. So if this is something that you'd be interested in, please do complete the form or get in touch with me and we can talk about it in a little bit more detail. If you have any ideas about how to involve more colleagues who have disabilities in our research, or you're just interested in the work the digital skills team have been doing, please do get in touch. And here's a link to the Ways of Working website if you're interested. Thanks very much for listening and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Hi, I'm Matt Tyus, Principal Designer and Product Owner for the Co-op's design system. The design system exists to help co-op teams build digital products and services quickly and efficiently and to the highest standards. But we recognise that we need to do more to help colleagues from all across co-op to create better, more inclusive customer experiences. So now we're creating something new, something that's broader, better, and for anyone who works on products, services and communications at co-op. Our colleagues have told us it can be hard to know where to start with topics like accessibility, so we're going to help with that, as well as much more. To be kept up to date on our progress, collaborate with us and get early access, sign up to our mailing list. You can use the QR code on the slide, or the link will be posted into the chat. Thank you.
And that's a wrap on day 2 of Accessibility Manchester with the special co-op takeover. 5 fantastic lightning talks, so much to take in and so much to think about. As we said yesterday, if you've got any questions now or questions that pop into your head kind of later today, drop them over on Slido using the hashtag accessibility. What we're planning on doing is writing a follow-up blog post after the event that summarises all of the questions, and we'll answer as many of them as we can in that blog post. Today was all about scaling accessibility, and hopefully across the 5 different talks you've heard lots of hints and tips and practical things you can do within your own organisations to bring accessibility to life, and how teams can work to be more inclusive and create more inclusive environments. I think at Co-op we're making fantastic strides in the right direction. There is still an awful lot left for us to do. I think we need to be really humble in accepting how much further we've got to go, but we're really happy to be sharing this platform and putting what we've learned forward, and we'd encourage you to do the same. We know that we're not perfect, no organisation is, but take what you've learned today, apply it into your own org, or come back to Accessibility Manchester and share what you've learned in a future event. A huge thank you to our speakers today, Sam, Dave, Chris, Alex and Vicky. Doing presentations is never easy. The amount of prep work that goes into any presentation is kind of normally half an hour of prep for 1 minute of presentation, so it just tells you how much prep has gone into the lightning talks that you've seen today. And not only that, but doing these kind of talks remote feels so much harder than doing them in person with no feedback. So I think for the speakers to give such a great account of themselves is fantastic. So a huge round of applause from me in a virtual sense. And that brings an end to day 2. So we're more than halfway through the takeover for this week, and there's just 1 day left. And tomorrow we kind of wrap out the event by talking about how to get accessibility done. So how within your teams can you practically now bring this to life? So we will see you back again tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Thank you very much.